This is Mrs. Miller, and this module about writing alternative narrative endings will help you prepare for that possibility on a standardized test. So in addition to writing arguments or informational text, one task that you might be asked to do on a standardized test is to write a new ending for a story. So the first thing that you'll have to do is to read the narrative they provide very closely. That means paying close attention to these narrative elements: plot, foreshadowing, point of view, character traits, character arc, and theme. Let's quickly review each one of those. So first, pay attention to what happens in the story. That's called the plot. You'll need to build on the story that has already been created if you are writing a new ending. Let's use Little Red Cap or Little Red Riding Hood as our mentor text as we discuss each of these points. So as you read, pay attention to the hints that have been given about the plot development. You may want to play off of them in your new ending. So you can see in the picture that the wolf has its tongue hanging out back there, suggesting that it's hungry. So that perhaps is some foreshadowing for what may happen next. Also consider the traits of the characters in the story. That's characterization. For example, Little Red Cap won't suddenly become super savvy and fierce with the wolf at the end if she's been presented as an innocent child in the beginning. At the end of the narrative, you will not be introducing new traits to the characters unless there's a very good cause for those characters to have those new traits. Also, you'll want to consider how the character may be changing as the story goes on. That's called the character arc. In the fairy tale, a Little Red Cap doesn't change until the end when she learns her lesson. And mostly she's just sorry that she didn't listen to her mother. But she has to learn the lesson, otherwise there's really no story to be told. Next, you'll want to think about the point of view. So you'll need to keep the story in the same point of view that the original story is told from. Who's telling the story? Is it a character in the story? Is it an outside observer? If so, whose minds can this outside observer read and report on? Do not switch the point of view in your new ending. And then finally, be sure that you understand the conflicts, both internal and external, in the story and how they might influence a new ending. Don't ignore the conflicts, but instead use them to create a different ending. For example, Little Red Cap's grandmother might spank her at the end for disobeying. That could be a reasonable response, especially if the grandmother's shaken up after having been cut out of the belly of the wolf. Okay, so now that you're ready to write, you want to carefully read the prompt. You're doing that to think about where in the story you are supposed to begin writing. For example, if you're supposed to start writing from the climax, be prepared to include very strong emotion that fits with the plot and with the conflict. On the other hand, if you're asked to write after that climactic scene, make sure that the emotion or the tension is lessening, because that's the falling action after the main emotion has been spent during that climactic scene. If you're adding a new resolution to the story, most of the emotion has built and now is receding before you start writing. This would be the time to tie up the loose ends and offer some reflection or advice or even a prediction, really to stress the theme or the lesson that comes from the story. So now that you've read the narrative and you're paying attention to the elements that will influence your new narrative ending, you need to craft it. So most writers attempt to do two things at the end of a narrative. Number one, they want to leave the reader with some emotion and refer somehow to one of the themes of the story. Number two. So how can you do that? Well, we'll talk about 4 different techniques. One way is to use strong feeling. For example, one character may reflect back on a memory about something that happened in the story. Little Red Cap, for example, knew that seeing the big bad wolf with his gigantic and sharp teeth that were ready to devour her was one sight she would never forget. Another way to create strong feeling is to have a character share a wish or a prediction. Little Redcap wished she'd listened more closely to her mother when she told her to stay on that path. She knew if she had obeyed her mother, none of this trouble would have happened. A second technique is to end with strong action. In this example, we see the use of imagery or sensory description to emphasize the action. The huntsman sliced open the wolf's belly, and with a rush of fluid, out popped Little Redcap and Granny, gasping for air. A third strategy is to create a strong image that will stay in the reader's mind. In this example, Granny somewhat unexpectedly has grabbed Little Redcap and is giving her a hard spanking. Now, that's not the picture, obviously, but this is the example that we're using. So once she was free from the hairy wolf's carcass, Granny grabbed Little Redcap, turned the child over her knee, and swatted Little Redcap's bottom with her broad, flat hand. Notice again that imagery here helps the reader visualize the scene. And then one last technique we want to talk about is using dialogue, strong dialogue, to summarize the main events in the story, or to overtly state the lesson from the story, that would be the theme, or even to make a prediction. This can come from the protagonist himself or herself and be said to himself or to another character. So in our example, we read, "Oh, Granny, it's all my fault. I'll always listen to what Mother tells me to do in the future." So we see the dialogue that reveals the theme. Or the dialogue could come from an older and wiser character or a foil even, and be spoken to the protagonist. For example, the huntsman gave a mighty sigh and said, "Little Redcap, I hope you've learned that you must be careful around strangers." So the huntsman there is scolding Little Redcap for her foolish actions using dialogue. Okay, so those are examples from a simple fairy tale. One thing that you want to avoid doing is letting aliens or the government or Superman or actually even a huntsman who just happens to be nearby swoop in to save the day. This is a writing technique that has its own name, Deus Ex Machina, and it refers to these machines that Greek playwrights used to employ to have God kind of swoop in, the gods swoop in ancient Greek dramas and like fix everything or create the ending. And while this technique may have been acceptable in older pieces of fiction or drama, today readers really feel cheated when writers introduce something that's completely new at the end of the story. And using this technique where you allow some hitherto unknown character to swoop in and save the day really suggests that you have not carefully read the narrative and you are not able to craft a suitable alternative ending. So avoid having those kinds of things happen. Okay, quick review. So if you are required to write a new ending on an existing narrative, you're going to want to closely read the original narrative. You're looking for clues. You're looking for all those excellent elements of narrative that you would always look for and perhaps even annotate. Then you're going to look at your prompt carefully and consider, where do you have to start this alternative ending? And you plan your ending to use one of these following strategies to get across the theme, either strong action, strong feeling, strong images, or strong dialogue. So now what? Now go back to the Canvas module, read the text, and take the quiz on Canvas that comes next. If you still have questions or concerns, there is a review video that's also posted. So good luck.